Got it.
Now it's official.
We're here.
We're here. Awesome. So, yeah, why don't you introduce yourself and kind of what you do, and then we'll kind of just like dive into some conversation and see what comes up.
Okay, awesome.
I also want that juice.
So welcome everybody. My name is Alexa Iya Soro. My birth name is Alexandra Stephanie Marie Eliopoulos Ellis. The name was shortened when my family emigrated from Greece 2 generations ago. And yeah, how do I like to introduce myself? I feel like I'm just a woman that has seen that there was a point in my life where I would either continue to suffer or choose to heal. And that was about 12 years ago with the death of my brother, Aaron Charles Ellis, to cancer. And like probably many of the people listening, there's like that pivotal point of like, ooh, I don't think I can do it like this anymore. Where do I go? And so I just followed like a steady streamline of experiences, and that resulted in exploring ecstatic dance, somatic embodiment, yoga, starting with Ashtanga yoga, expressive arts, depth psychology, mythology. And, it started in childhood, but like just being in nature, like really being in nature and allowing myself to open up to the meaning making that comes outside of like my rational mind. And so from there, I had these experiences, whether they were with a variety of plant medicines or retreats or whatever. And then my curious self, being a psychologist in training, wanted to figure out why. And so I'm here it's mainly right now I support my community as psychedelic integration counseling and plant allyship, teaching people how to prepare for plant medicine retreats, teaching people how to understand the particular kinds of personality types they walk into a space with, and seeing what parts of their personality have been adaptations that just are no longer helpful. And so helping people lay those to rest in a gentle way, whether that's through ritual or internal family systems or any form of somatic therapy or expressive arts movement. And so, yeah, I'm in retreat here in Mexico, basically twice a month with various medicines. And my passions are really rites of passage and bringing us back to just a natural way of healing. But always the buy-in is generally through coming to therapy because of suffering and just letting that be real and human. So that's my short as possible introduction.
I love it. No, it's beautiful. And I mean, it speaks so much to why I think our paths have crossed and aligned so many times. And I know we are both in like the very Western clinical world together for a while. And it's really interesting to see how that shifts over time. And I know we were joking around before we started recording that like so many of my closest friends from the clinical world have just foregone their licenses and gone completely holistic. And I'm always trying to tread that line, being licensed, but being a holistic provider, and how do we work on integration and the distrust many people have for Western medicine. And a lot of people that come to the limbic system and brain retraining community, they're only searching those terms when they've exhausted all of their options, and they feel very like abandoned or gaslighted by the Western medical community, and what's great about that is I think it's kind of like this back door. It's not good they had suffering to get here, but it's this back door to get them into holistic integrative types of medicines, which is really what's going to heal everyone eventually anyway. And we're moving back towards that as a society. But I love that you even brought up like IFS, and, that is an evidence-based clinical integration we talk a lot about in our program, but how that can then also be this idea of holism and gestalt and where that goes, and just how we do this parts work. And what was so interesting is I had actually chatted with a client earlier, and I'm like, your homework is to do like your natal chart and your Enneagram and your Myers-Briggs and your human design chart. Because I'm like, I want you to stop thinking of your personality as a diagnosis. And I've had that conversation. I don't know if you have this experience. I've had that conversation with like 6 clients this week because I think things come in themes, right? And every client this week was calling me like, no, I really think this is it. This is another episode of this. Or this is just because of my diagnosis. I'm never going to change this. And I'm like, you have become this product of thinking of what a doctor labeled you as. And now you're actually, the word I'm looking for, I can't even think right now, you're pathologizing human emotion because someone told you it was bipolar, or you're pathologizing human emotion because even if you have bipolar or borderline or whatever, that doesn't mean every emotion you have is a symptom of your illness. You're allowed to have emotions. You're supposed to have emotions. And we talk even in our community about a lot of these medications that numb people for so long. The intention was to numb extreme activation or extreme, dissociation, but now we've numbed the entire range of the emotional experience. And that's where I think this idea of kind of indigenous practice and plant medicine, we're supporting you to feel the range of emotion and to say, I'm supposed to feel big things and to ride the wave, kind of like pendulation and titration, but it's not allowed in Western medicine. And that's where I think so many people are seeking this type of integration. And I'm just so glad that you were able to make the time to talk, because I think it aligns so well with what you're doing. And again, we're not like a program that says you have to do psychedelic integration to heal, but the idea that plant medicine, there are things in the natural earth that are causing real shifts in consciousness, and what that shift in consciousness allows us to uncover on a deeper level: limbic system, relations, emotions. So I would love to hear like some of the stuff that maybe people come to you with, and like where you've seen some shifts, and what are all the moving pieces maybe that you think are so important in some of these shifts too.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to respond with 2 fun sayings that we like to share when we're at retreat. This was shared through a combo facilitation training, which is a secretion of the Philomedusa bicolor. It's a animal medicine that comes from the jungle, usually paired with before ayahuasca. It's essentially it's lip peptide therapy, but from an animal.
You're licking frogs, right? I mean,
yeah. Essentially, it goes through the lymphatic system, but it's a really beautiful cleansing for the
I
body.
didn't mean to make fun of it. I'm just thinking people that think about the psychedelic experience where people joke about like, don't lick the toads in the forest. It's like you're doing that on purpose to get an integrative experience, right?
Yeah. So there's two different amphibian medicines currently.
Oh,
One
so
is the
cool.
Sonoran desert toad, which is from Texas, northern of Mexico, and that is called Bufo alvarius. Bufo alvarius is actually smoked, and it's the strongest form of DMT on the face of this earth. So that's one medicine. Another medicine is called Kambo, and it's the Philomedusa bicolor that's from the Amazon. And it's a non-psychedelic medicine, but it's a purgative. And so one is a very embodied process, and one is like kind of like sprout you out to the astral realm.
Thank you for clarifying, because I think no one really knows any of people, like a lot of people I know are not aware of what really is the scientific nature of this and how deep it goes. And I find it so interesting. And again, it's this wisdom that's been lost to so many as well. And so I thank you for clarifying, because I'm like, I see the toad on your site and I'm like, cool, there's something about frogs that is just like, people are tripping on frogs. This is really cool,
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there is a bufo toad that is in your area, your neck of the woods, that dogs can eat, and it is poison, but it's a different bufo. So it's the same genus, different species. So that is a very real thing. And so don't let your dogs eat toads. I just wanted to share the way I've been constellating and looking at modern Western medicine. And it feels like, the theory of counseling, like actual counseling, has been around 50 years. And if we look at the great spectrum of the human race, I think that modern Western medical medicine is more of like it's in its teenage years. It's worked really hard to develop itself, its identity, kind of like create its ego, its personality. And now it's old enough to reflect and say, all right, before we go into the next step of this kind of series, what do we want to get rid of? What do we want to let go of? So in many ways, I think that modern Western medicine developmentally is in a perfect place. We just need to remember that it hasn't been around forever. So to zoom out and to look at the greater perspective of the collective consciousness of what it is for modern Western medicine, the first two attributes are alleviate suffering, and avoid pain, save life. Those are the two first laws. And so if we look at someone that's, coming to a psychotherapist or a psychiatrist and they're suffering, that system says alleviate suffering. They're like, great, I have something that can alleviate suffering. And at the same time, I'd love to present this kind of idea, and it's this saying of white man's medicine, feel good today, feel like shit tomorrow. Brown or red man's medicine, feel like shit today, feel great tomorrow. And it's the way I look at it too. It's like a loving parent that like really doesn't want their child to suffer, but also realizes their kid needs to explore their own boundaries or maybe bump into the table. And so I think all of us need to look at ourselves and reparent ourselves in a way of like, yes, I do not want to suffer. Maybe this medication can help me for a little bit, but I need to also press the edge of what is the suffering making me look at? If it's anxiety, yes, it's good to alleviate. There's also plants and herbs like nervines, like kava kava, like oat straw that can help regulate the central nervous system, heal the gut. 80% of serotonin in your body is made from the bacteria of your gut. So learning how to like short term take care, and then also long term, how do we not always rely on like the shortcuts? And I think a lot of people coming to, like you had shared, like limbic retraining or like holistic medicine have realized, okay, so the short term has helped for 10 years, but now it's like I still have like many decades to go. How can I live my life? No longer do I just want to survive. Thank you, SSRIs, for helping me kind of dull the intense sensation so I can get my life back on track. But now I'm ready to thrive. And so the way I look at it, I'm like, perfect. This is like the perfect kind of timing for us to look at. There are some medicines that help, and are we abusing that? It's the same thing as those of us using some of our personality traits, like hardworking, ethic. That is a part of my personality that I love. But I've noticed in the past years, maybe I've been enslaving that part of myself too much and leaning on it too much. What is it like to take a step back? So a lot of people come to me, mainly because there's anxiety and depression, and it's presenting in someone's personal life. But then we look at the whole of humanity, and we have large earthquakes in Turkey, and we have water that is no longer clean. We have honeybees that are unable to find their way home. We have all these kind of like unseen things, but we are so deeply feeling them. And so the central nervous system, we all have our own, propensity. Mine is to get anxious and then like overperform. And my husband is to shut down. So we could classify me as someone with anxiety and classify him as someone with depression. And yet, how do we find balance? How do we find more resilience? And so I love to work with people in a variety of ways of trying to find the humanness in it, and also like recontextualizing ourselves not only from like an anthropomorphic lens through like the human lens, but more of like, what would this look like in nature? Is this okay? Like, are my emotions that are rageful just like the ocean that is storming? Does the ocean storm all the time? No. So maybe I shouldn't be raging all the time. But if rage arises as like a serious signifier of a boundary being crossed, how can I let that go and process that? And how can I just like let that flow without attaching a story or repressing it, really? And that's like, how do we just let things flow? So I think that answered your question, but
Did. I love that. And I think, people probably get so sick. I use some of the same examples over, but I feel like they're so powerful. There was that book, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And Peter Levine talks similarly in some of his books about the same experience where in nature, an animal faces a threat and it literally only does fight, flight, or freeze. I mean, like there is like it is 100%, they are fighting to the death in that instant of feeling threatened, or they are running for their lives in that instant, or they're like a little, possum that's literally freezing and playing dead to survive. And after that, after any of those, they're shaking it off. They're literally going into the state where you see them like involuntarily tremoring and shaking to get all of that adrenaline away and the catecholamine response that maybe sets in, and the chemicals go through very quickly because you're allowing yourself to just organically respond the way that you're designed to. And as humans, we're the only species that's like, oh, I'm supposed to be polite, or society doesn't let me defend myself the way that I should, or I can't run away because this is my job. And especially, gosh, in like law enforcement and healthcare and the military, we're in a weird society where we have compartmentalized a lot of the hardest work, of just being human. And especially for healers, we would 100, 200 years ago, we would be living in a shack on the side of the village, and we would be responsible for babies being born and crossing people over to the other side and providing medicine and providing ceremony. And we would be a welcome part of that village. And we would have days that are filled with joy and beauty of life and the sadness of death, but we would have a lot of balance. And now you have hospice nurses. I mean, like, God, how is that person not going to have symptoms of depression? You're taking something that's supposed to be, okay, nurses help. And now it's like, okay, no, you're an oncology hospice nurse. I mean, all you do all day is death, right? Or same with military and police. Instead of communities where we're all looking out for each other and serving like community justice, and everyone has this responsibility of protection and making sure things are safe, we have people that their only job every day 24/7 is to put their life in danger and feel at risk and be hyper vigilant. Same with the military, right? So like, of course they're going to develop symptoms of just dysregulated nervous systems and emotional and boundary and communication and relational issues. So part of that compartmentalization of our society, and especially our roles in society, we don't have these archetypes anymore the way that they were. And so again, going back to that animal kingdom, a clan of lions doesn't have like the police officer lion and the nurse lion. They're all filling all of those roles in their own ways. And then they're able to kind of beautifully use their organic intuition and their chemical response and their brain to go through these things and feel them fully and to have the full range of experience, right? And then they don't develop chronic stress disease because they never have a chance for cortisol to accumulate, because it's just, they're feeling it, they're acting on it, it goes away, they're processing the full range that they should, they're not getting artificially boxed in or stopped at a certain place, right? So I don't know, I feel that is such a thing that we've done only, like you said, in very recent years, that just actually is adding to more symptom and pathology. And the same thing with why Western medicine doesn't quite work. We compartmentalize body parts. Someone comes in and they're chronically ill and they can't figure out their symptoms. So for their neuro symptoms, it's neurology. And for their pain symptoms, it's pain management and ortho. And for their fatigue, it's rheumatology. And then no one ever communicates. We've compartmentalized this person. Now they have 15 diagnoses, 30 different medications, 10 surgeries. No one ever stopped to think, is there some bigger picture issue going on that we could be treating as part of a whole, even if it was using Western medicines to treat? And now we've gone so far down the rabbit hole and we can't even see the big picture anymore. We just see someone with 25 diagnoses. And again, that's where I think people are like, they hear limbic system and they're like, this makes so much sense. Like, is there something deeper that we should be looking to?
And I love that you bring that up, because you know who can integrate it all? It's the person themselves. They're the ones living in the body. And I feel like that's why I love coming to this work, really, is to just polish our own inner mirror and our own inner knowing, and to offer, there's so many different modalities and Chinese medicine and alternative medicine. Pick one that interests you, devote yourself to it, and start to develop your own language with yourself. Like you had shared, like someone that for a while I was serving as a death doula, and it was heavy, and I knew that I needed balance. And so without, calling it burnout or putting a story to it. I'm like, how can I bring some more like kind of like birth enhancing things or some more joy? And that was really helpful to look at. And the most amazing thing I want to share about what I've witnessed in any type of somatic therapy, whether it is with plant medicine or without, you had mentioned, the defrosting or the shaking of the animals after the trauma. The body's always ready for you. The body's like always holding it. And I think really that kind of like dispersal of energy is sometimes met by our anxiety or our depression because it feels too big. So anxiety is kind of a distraction to to put a lid on the catharsis, or depression is a distraction. And like beautiful. As soon as we realize that, sounds like you need a safer container to release and let go. But I've seen a lot of people do the actual shaking, especially when working with the plant medicine of Bufo. I've seen some people like myself, I have like a lot of myofascial releasing. And really what that is, it just means that the default mode network goes a little bit offline enough for the body to be like, okay, I'm going to lead you and you just get to watch. And there are things like in yoga, for example, if you're not, ready for plant medicine or feel like that's a good option for you, it's called the Osho shake. And you literally shake for hours and hours and hours. And sometimes you can just do that throughout the day. Just moving the body, creating any bouncing in the system will like loosen fascia. Or, breath work. Also amazing way to help there be basically an influx of carbon dioxide in the muscles. And then there's something that's called tetany, that's a contraction and then a release. And so I feel like we are so capable of healing. There just needs to be the right support or a new mindset or just kind of like a recontextualization or permission. I see a lot of people come into retreat just so that they can have a moment just to breathe for 7 days without any type of expectation, any type of internet, just a moment. And it's so effective because we are so prone towards healing. We really are.
Yeah, I love that. When I did one of my yoga therapy trainings that was focused on trauma, and we did like the psoas shake, where it's very hyper focused on really fatiguing the muscles in the psoas and around the pelvis in order to fatigue them to the point of exhaustion where it induces shaking. And so it's finding this way of actually pushing into discomfort, like a safe amount of a discomfort that you're in control of, that then allows that release in a safe and controlled way. And so, yeah, I just love that idea of we have to kind of push into discomfort in order to heal as well. And that's something that Western medicine is like, no, avoid discomfort at all costs, right? Like numb, numb, numb. We don't want to feel it. And so much of what we need to work on is this idea that healing is not comfortable. And what I think I try to talk a lot about in our program is, this is not a gimmicky money back guarantee healing program, because even some of the limbic system programs out there, they just seem so gimmicky or cold and clinical. And I'm like, no, this is the idea of unlocking and understanding how our limbic system is responsible for our healing, is just giving you permission to use the key that you have to unlock your inner healing reserves and to use your intuition and to maybe give you some tools and guide you in a way that you haven't explored before. But it's all stuff that's accessible. It always has been accessible. And how do we even give people the like you said, the permission or the knowledge when it's been hidden, almost like intentionally, right? Because big pharma and Western medicine, they want you just sick enough to have a lifetime patient in a lot of ways too. And so a lot of integrative work, it's so foreign to think you might only need 1 or 2 or 3 months or a year of doing this kind of work or whatever, and then you might not need it again because you have the tools, you've done this. And that's foreign to people as well. And I think there's a lot that goes into just, you have everything you need to heal, but that does not seem like a innate concept that we have anymore. And we've externalized our power. And not to mention systemic oppression in medicine. And so there's a lot of intentional externalization of power and just hierarchy in medicine, which is just very abusive. And a lot of people with medical trauma then have trouble with that too. So giving someone their power. Oh my God, the donkeys are like singing. They agree with me. Giving people back their power and saying, no, you have the power to do this, and it's within your control. And it might take some time. It might be uncomfortable, but that's what it takes to succeed, right? Like running a marathon, like you have the potential, but it's going to hurt. You're going to have days that don't feel that good, but then you're going to do it and you're going to feel really good about doing it. And you're going to have built this inner strength and reserve you didn't think you had. And it's kind of the same with training to heal. And so I think that's what we have to keep in mind too, is some things can't be researched because they can't be quantified in a data set the way that Western medicine or the people who pay for the studies would like it to look. And the studies that don't match the narrative get thrown out anyway, or they don't get funded, right? So it's really interesting to go deeper into that side of it as well, and to really think about like, you know, where do we go in a place that we open ourselves up to possibility? And we know that it's nice to have a science backing, and it's so great that so much of it does have some science behind it, but again, our intuition is not a data set. And if we trust our intuition, or we let our intuition be silenced by science, science is hypothesis and testing. That's all it is. And did we find a data set that matched our hypothesis? Did we account for all the extraneous variables? Probably not, because you never can. And then the science changes 5 years from now anyway. And then it's like, what really is lasting and true is our intuition and our, you know, what generations of people have known to be true, with like intergenerational ideals too. But I don't know, it just really, I feel like we have to find a way to bridge the two, because I like to be able to tell these science-based people, no, there is science here. But once we get you to dip your toe in the water of intuition and holistic ideas, sometimes people are like, oh, now I see. Now I'm feeling into it. I'm not just thinking into it. So
Absolutely. I love that you mentioned that. Yeah, I think that those of us that have grown up in modern Western world, it's good to kind of know what's going on. I give a lot of people like neurobiological buy-ins of what's happening during a plant medicine experience and what's going on with your personality. What is the default mode network? Because it is important to have kind of a general cognitive understanding so that the body can then relax. Because if we don't know what's going on, we don't get it, we're anxious, everything that we see might be a threat. But if we're feeling comfortable and willing and able, and you'll know what that feels like in your body when you're stepping into a space, then we're able to just see what's happening and connect things in a more relaxed manner, really. So yeah, I'm gonna take a moment and just tap into my body and see if there's anything else I wanted to touch in on with you today. It's been really beautiful. So let's see. I'm just noticing that I think the most important thing is to remember that healing is not linear by any means. For me, it's a spiral. We kind of spiral back onto a theme of our life or back into a point in our life. And we don't have to start anywhere in particular. Just start with the first closest thing, really. If it's starting with the hope of a spiritual experience, go for that. If it's starting with the acknowledgement of suffering, go with that. If it's starting with the awareness that, you know, the belly isn't feeling so good these days, start with that. Because it, like you said, we are inherently body, breath, mind, spirit, if you believe in spirit, or energy and matter. And they all link together. So
that was beautiful. Thank you for sharing that and like integrating that conversation so beautifully too. And, you know, I hope we can partner up more and even have more deep conversations in the future too. I think it's just such a great message, you know, that you have in the work you're doing. And I think that's really one of the next kind of waves of the future we're seeing. And like you said, you don't even have to have the psychedelic piece, because I know, you know, there's so many views on that. I think it's a beautiful option for a lot of people. But even just in our course, we touch on herbalism and just plant allies in different ways. And the fact that, you know, around us in our natural world, we used to be able to go out. I'm reading this really awesome book because of where we moved. We're close to where the Seminoles, you know, had lived. And there's this wonderful book on plant medicine from a Seminole perspective. And one of the last women who really had studied and learned it from her parents and her grandparents, and we're losing that wisdom. And the person writing the book was joking around, like, you know, driving down the road with this lady, and she would just randomly screech at me to stop. And she'd be like, okay, get out, and then go. And then you see the one that's red, but not really red, and it's next to the one that's green. And she'd be like, okay, grab that because we're going to need it later. And then it would like go back to the village and like be doing whatever. And someone would come to them and would be like, oh, I have this problem with this. And she's like, yeah, that's what we needed that for. So not only was it that she knew it was medicinal and she would need it in her apothecary at some point, but she had some kind of innate intuition that someone was going to need it like that day, you know? And so it's this wonderful idea of like the plants speak to us, and we've lost a lot of that connection. But if you even just go out every day and sit with plants or garden and form a relationship with plants, then a lot of times you have this strange intuition that comes about, and you're like, oh, I just feel like I need to have some lemon balm today, or I feel like I want to have some mint in my tea. And it's so interesting to see that connection of like, wow, I didn't realize my stomach hurt, but that mint really helped, you know, even just to make it sound so simple, because it can be simple. You can start with just, I'm going to have a little herb garden on my windowsill and just learn these 4 plants, and to have that deeper connection. But I think the most beautiful part of any of these more holistic medicines is they come from the earth. And so then we're also reconnecting to the earth has everything we need to heal. The stuff that's not within our bodies has been given to us all around us, and it steps forward when it needs to and when we need to know about it. And again, what a beautiful and different and nourishing way to view the universe, rather than something cold and prescriptive, you know, and to show that things step forward when we need them, and to trust.
Absolutely. I feel like I'd love to have a whole different call on plant allyship, but it's not so much about the plant. It's not about ayahuasca. It's not about lemon balm. It's not about cacao. It's about the world that opens up and the consciousness that opens up inside of us when we commune with this plant in a regular way. You know, it's not about the look of someone sitting and doing meditation, right? It's not the form. It is the formless that is cultivated if we continue a practice. And that's why I think we call these, you know, herbalism as a practice, psychotherapy as a practice. And I love working with the plants in this way. I deeply work with cacao every day. It's not necessarily about the spirit of cacao, although I am a little bit more animist. So I work with the Mayan mythology of cacao, ish cacao, but it's more about the quality that I'm culminating and enculturating in myself as I work with this plant. And then it just becomes a resource. And eventually, I think the goal is that we no longer actually need a lot of these great teacher medicines. We may just need to sit with them or call in the spirit. And so, but we can talk about that another day. I feel like that would be a
Oh, I
really
could
rich
go on
place
for hours. Yeah. And there's a great
go.
book, Plant Spirit Medicine. I think
Yeah.
Elliot is his first name. I can't remember the rest, but talks about the same thing, the spirit of the medicine, you know, and just Maya Toll wrote a great book called The Herbiary, where she goes into like the actual, you know, ancient spiritual and kind of mythological ideas of these plants, and just bringing in their essence and knowing about them, and cultivating friendship with them. And same with our foods, right? When we cultivate friendship and relationship with our food, and we see food, even from an Ayurvedic perspective, sattvic foods and foods that are living and foods that are life-giving, being so different. Oh, there's a bug. Well, the bug maybe is my spirit animal today. It doesn't look that terrifying, but you know, foods that are working towards life and healing. And again, I just did a conversation the other day on like, there is no good or bad diet. It's Eastern perspectives and indigenous perspectives would talk about just finding balance. If you're a very cold, dry person, you need the nourishing, warm foods. If you're someone who has an imbalance that leads you to run hot and oily, of course you're going to feel better raw vegan for a while. Like there doesn't need to be this scientific debate on, people get so angry about their identity of their diets. but they're not in
Mhm.
relationship with their food. They're in relationship with their idea of identifying as being someone who follows a strict diet and thinks it is scientifically correct. So again, we're losing the message of what the purpose of the food is supposed to be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So part two
Yes,
coming up.
coming soon.
Maybe,
Yes.
and maybe I would love to hear, if there's an opportunity for folks to listen to this and maybe reflect what they're interested in hearing more about, because I know that we touched on a bunch of different things, and it'd
Yeah,
be
I
nice
would
to
love
like
for
really
people to
kind of
come.
go into depth on something together. But this is
Yeah.
really you and me also just getting to know each other again in this way.
In a new
So
way, exactly. No, I
yeah,
love it. Thank you so much for your
yeah,
time.
thank
It's
you.
wonderful. And I think people are gonna really have so many questions and just open up their awareness. So I think that's
Yeah.
great. Well, we will definitely talk again soon.
Yeah, thank you, sister. I love what you're doing. I love that you made the moves to creating life and liberty in your space so that you can continue to offer your gifts. Not easy, and I acknowledge that and I honor that. So good work. Yeah,
Thank
yeah.